It's time for the Brouhaha Sports Show. Brouhaha Sports with award-winning sports writer Dale McKee and co-host Marshall Wood. Talking sports with the legends of the game and famous sports personalities. Brouhaha! Now to Marshall and Dale with tonight's guest.
Welcome to tonight's show, everybody. The last one for April. We're moving through 2022 at a pretty fast rate, Dale. How's it going for you today?
Hey, it's going good. How about you?
Dale, you know, it's been somewhat of a stressful period here in my life here the past few days, but the sun is shining and looking up, and I'm excited about tomorrow.
Now, it's raining outside. You know,
it's shining in my spirit.
It's just Tuesday. You know?
My spirit is it's shining. Well, Dale, you know, we're going to get to our show here in a minute, our guests and everything, but, you know, let's get started here a little bit. Let's talk about the sideline view a little bit.
Ooh, sideline view.
Yeah, you know, I read your article, and I saw some stuff in there about the University of Southern Mississippi baseball team. You know, I kind of look at the Clarion Ledger every once in a while, and I hadn't seen anything about the Southern Mississippi baseball team in the Clarion Ledger, but tell us a little bit about what they're up to. They seem to be having a pretty doggone good year.
Yeah, they up to number 4 in the nation.
We're talking about the University of Southern Mississippi.
Yeah, and they've won 14 straight. And they're supposed to play Southeastern Louisiana tonight in Hammond. Then they go on the road to play UAB. Yeah. So they're in pretty good shape in the conference. They're like 16-2 in Conference USA. So I think it's going to come down to them and Louisiana Tech. And Louisiana, they defeated Louisiana Tech 2 out of 3. So that should give them an upper hand. And they get to host the Conference USA baseball tournament. So that's going to be a big deal. That's going to be the last week of May. So
I don't want to put the cart ahead of the horse, but they're in line, if they can continue with this success, they could be a host team for a couple of rounds, could they not?
Yeah, I think they're going to have to win the regular season championship, keep kind of going like they are now, not maybe win every game, but they're going to have to win. I don't really know how many games they have left, but they're... like they played 42, so they can't be very much more. You know, weekend series I'm talking about this weekend and a couple in May, so you're looking at about 15 more ball games maybe. You know, if they can win 10 of them, you know, I mean, if they get to that 40 win mark and win the conference tournament, they're just about guaranteed a spot in the regionals to start with, being a host. Yeah. And they could even be named a super regional team. So look for the 40-42 win. But think about it, the top three teams in front of them they don't have a winning streak like Southern has. Yeah. So so that's good.
You know, you talk about strengths for a baseball team, and you know we've got things. What's their strengths? They must not have many weaknesses, I'm sure. What's the strengths of this Golden Eagle baseball team?
I think it's their pitching staff, and they do get timely hitting. Yeah. But, you know, that's good. All good teams have that. Yeah. Thing I think really makes them go is their pitching staff. Yeah. You know, they keep them in every ball game. Yeah. They're kind of like an SEC pitching staff. We discussed that before. Yeah. They're just very talented. You know, they probably got a deeper depth than State or Ole Miss right now as far as pitching.
Speaking of which, you know, I'm not hating. You know, I love Mississippi teams. Mississippi State's defending national champion. You know, they lost, I guess, their big pitcher, you know, early on in the year. Ole Miss was ranked number 1 in the nation at one time, and the wheels fell off of that wagon. I don't really know why. But I think this is somewhat of a shock for the baseball community in Mississippi, considering the way last year and the way this year started. And when the smoke's kind of clearing out around here, the old Golden Eagles are fooling around sitting on top of the perch. I dig that.
Yeah, Ole Miss, they've got an SEC tournament every year since 2011, and they might not be invited back this year. And that would be, you know, because they only take like maybe the top 12 teams, and there's 14, so 2 of them will sit at home, and Ole Miss is sitting in the cellar right now, and they go to Arkansas this week. And that's no easy challenge. Arkansas is very, very good. State's got a chance. They won their last 2 series against Ole Miss, and I assume it was Auburn the week before. And they also are going to Missouri this week. Missouri's in last place in the in the Eastern Division, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They're in the East, even though they're in the West, But
Yeah.
They put them. It's like the old Saints used to years ago. They used to play in the Western Division with San Francisco and LA and Atlanta. And
Man,
that's
how's that work out?
Yeah, Dallas is.
It's kind of like the SEC Eastern and Western divisions.
Yeah.
Now here's a question for you, jumping ship.
Yeah.
Okay, when Oklahoma and Texas come on board, wouldn't it make sense to put them in the West and move Auburn and Alabama to the East?
No, that'd make too much sense.
You don't think there's a chance of that happening? Well, listen, who you got for our guest tonight?
We got Michael Katz, K-A-T-Z. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But Michael is the Ole Miss beat writer for the Northeast Daily Journal out of Tupelo, and he covers all Ole Miss sports.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing from him, Dale. And Dale and I are going to get right to our guest. But first, a word from our sponsor, and then Dale and I will be back with our guest right after the break.
Phillips Building Supply in Laurel, your hometown building supply store since 1954. We are locally owned and pride ourselves on helping our customers find exactly what they need. From foundations to roofs to doors and windows, Phillips has it. For tools, hardware, lumber, and plywood, visit Phillips Building Supply.
Welcome to the show, Michael. How's everything in Oxford?
It's good. It's one of the growing up in Southern California, I never really had to look at the forecast for the weather, so it has been a little bit of a change trying to figure out what it's going to be doing in Oxford. Yesterday it was 80 and sunny, and today it looks like we've got a big storm coming. But other than that, it's beautiful as always here.
Yes, Oxford is a nice place to go to a ball game or something like that. We all had an interesting weekend up there. You had the Grove Bowl, and we'll get to that in a minute. But tell us what your thoughts on the baseball weekend was.
Man, it was it started off so well with Dylan DeLucia pitching that complete game. It was exactly what they needed. Against Mississippi State, he gave them everything he had, and it was this huge win. And it kind of seemed like, the wheels were kind of falling off a little bit to that point, and it kind of felt like that might be where things start to turn around. And then they lose game 2, and then game 3 is just the one that kind of ripped their hearts out with being down 6-4 in the 9th, and Gonzalez hitting the 2-run home run to tie it, and then losing in extras in the 11th. It was just. It started off, it really looked like it could have been a turning point, and like things were trending in the right direction. And then, you look after Saturday, and it's just they're still kind of looking for answers. It was a lot of the guys on associated with baseball, and Mike Bianco and players. They've been very optimistic about this team, and they still are to an extent, but. After this game, even they were at a loss for words about, what had just happened. Kevin Graham, the outfielder, came up and said, guys, I really don't even know what to say, because it was just such a shocking result. And I know they play again tomorrow in Pearl, but man, that was I think that was kind of a tough pill to swallow how that weekend ended.
Yes. Now listen, is Keith Carter going to have a tough decision to make after the baseball season? Because all I see a lot on social media and things like that is everybody's bringing up the last 22 games in the series that State's won 18 of them. Is that does that go into any?
Yeah, I think this seemed like it was kind of an Omaha or bust sort of year, just kind of based on where teams been in recent years and how close they were last year and what they had coming back, at least offensively. I do think there is going to be a decision to be made, and that's above my pay grade in terms of how that ends up going. He has done, and Mike has done a great job. In 2 years, whatever it's been at Ole Miss, and really kind of creating a program that really hadn't had sustained success, and they have done some really nice things, but this team is at the point now. They're at the outside looking in of even making it to a regional, which is kind of crazy to think about because a month ago they were the number 1 team in the country, and it's just sort of all taken a turn. And I think it's going to be something to monitor. But Keith isn't the type of person who's going to do things in the middle of a season. I think that's kind of been his MO, and so. But I do think that depending how things go in Hoover and the next few weeks, I think it could be a decision where it was great and it worked for a long time, but maybe kind of do something different, or they could give it one more go.
I got you. Okay, let's get to the football for a couple minutes. Everybody wants to know. It was a spring game. A lot of times, people don't realize the spring game itself is not really, I guess, a decision on who's going to be where or anything like that. I assume it's into practices before the spring game. But what are your thoughts on the quarterback situation that everybody wants to know who's going to take Matt's place?
I think people were really excited to see Jackson Dart, and I think his final stat line was 11 out of 30, which is not, I think people were like, oh no, like what is this? But I think the thing people need to realize, one is, he's only been there for a month or two or whatever it's been. He's 18. He's a young, he's a young, freshman in college still. And, he's learning a new offense. He's just moved to a new place. I think there's probably a lot going on there. And he did look a lot better in the second half of the Grove Bowl. But he looked like, as I think as Lane kind of said, he looked like he was trying to win the job in the first half. And this isn't, I don't think, a decision that's going to be made until fall. And that's been pretty clear from everything that Lane and everyone has said. Luke Altmaier, I thought looked pretty good. Did he miss some throws? Yeah, but he was consistent. He, for the most part, took what was there. He didn't try to make the sort of hero play, and that's kind of what Jackson Dart did a little bit. He tried to play a little bit of hero ball, and took some shots down the field that weren't necessarily there. And in the second half, he got a lot better with that and sort of taking it as it came. But I think that I think everybody was just really excited to see what Dart could do because they saw what he did at USC, and he had all this hype around him. And the stats just don't look very good, and there are a lot of moments. Honestly, not very good, but it's a spring game, and there's sometimes you have guys who look like superstars in the spring game, never hear from come September.
Hey, Mike, excuse me. Mike.
A lot of football left. Even the spring practices, obviously, it's a chance for coaches to evaluate, but I still don't know how much stock you really put in it. I think next few months are really going.
Okay. Mike, you're coming in.
We're going to learn a lot more about that.
Mike, you're coming in kind of spotty, so we're trying to clear that up, and we apologize to our listeners. But okay, tell us about the running back room. I mean, they lost Snoop and they lost about everybody back there, didn't they? So how did the two transfers look, and how did Isaiah Woolard from Hattiesburg look?
He actually looked really nice. He had a couple of nice runs. It's one of those things where everybody gets so excited to see like the new guys that you forget that there's also guys like Isaiah Woolard and Kentrell Bullock who are still there and are trying to get their carries too. But I was really Evans didn't get a ton of work back there. I know I think the last scrimmage kind of thing we were at, he was a little bit limited there too. So I know they were fighting injuries a lot during the spring, and it's just probably not worth it to try to put a guy out there just because he can. I was really impressed with Bentley. I thought he did some really nice things. He looked really explosive. He had some nice cutbacks, and then he showed that speed, which I think everybody really likes. He's to compare him to Jerry Neely isn't fair. They're two different guys, but you see a sort of similar a guy who, when he gets in the open field, is going to make some special things happen. So I was really impressed with him. I think that running back room, it's crazy to think that when you lose 2,500 yards or whatever it was worth of rushing from your top four rushers, including Matt, and then you bring in two running backs, and I think most people don't think the running back room is going to drop off very much at all. If maybe there's a chance it's better because there's just you don't add talents like that every day. I was particularly impressed with Bentley.
You know, the transfers that came in, of course, Evans is one that, this is Marshall, by the way, that always sticks out in my mind. I watched his recruiting, and it started in his changing his mind. An interesting guy. Glad to have him up there in Oxford. I'm tell you what, on the offensive side of the ball, this tight end, this Trigg fella, seems to be making a big splash up that way. I'm really excited about him.
Yeah, no, I remember the first time. So it always somehow comes back to like my USC connection. I'm a USC grad. Lane Kiffin was the head coach when I was a student at USC. Somehow
wow.
we're both in Oxford, Mississippi, which is crazy to think about. And Jackson Dart was starting quarterback at SC for a few games last year, and he was thrown to Trigg. So it's like this alternate universe I've walked into where we're all in Oxford, Mississippi together. But the first time we walked out there for practice, we all just sort of looked at each other and said, Michael Trigg just looks like a different sort of guy. He is just bigger, stronger. I mean, he looks like he looks like it's like that. Like he can play basketball on grass with just his size and strength and speed. And he was really, really impressive in the spring game. By all accounts, he was really impressive in practices, and basically what everybody said was, they don't make guys like this. He is the type of talent that does not come along very often. And I know everybody was really excited about Jackson when he signed, but to get Michael Trigg, I think he's going to open things up in their offense in a way that, historically, Lane Kiffin offenses do like to use the tight end. They haven't done it. They didn't do this past year. Obviously they did it with Kenny Yeboah and. He did it at FAU and at Alabama and all that stuff, but they didn't really necessarily have that explosive tight end element last year, and I think this is really I think Trigg can really be a difference maker.
We're excited about him. I'm going to flip the line of scrimmage for you a minute now, names and stuff. I mean, I was looking at an article somewhere the other day, and they were talking about all the transfers on the defensive side of the ball. We hear about Dart, we hear about Trigg, we hear about Evans. When we flip over to the other side of the line of scrimmage, we got some pretty good folks coming in on that defensive side that people are thinking we could, kind of like your running back room. We lost a lot, but we may be as good or better this year than we were last. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of talent there too, and the coaching staff has been pretty clear that since they came in a couple years ago, they've really wanted to build up the depth on the defensive line, and I think that's where they're really kind of seeing things kind of turn a corner. When they added J.J. Pegues, who is an Oxford kid who started off at Auburn, Jared Ivey is a Georgia Tech guy. He was a 4-star recruit. They've added in these guys where now it's not like there's just 3 guys that have to play the whole game. They can rotate. They can have guys get breathers. And then when you add in, Cedric Johnson and the defensive tackles who were there last year, you're feeling pretty good about that group. Linebacker is I think the sort of question mark just in terms of you lose Chance Campbell, who was so good for them last year, but also losing Mark Robinson, and then they lost Lakia Henry. I think their top 3 or 4 linebackers from last year are all gone. There's just really not a lot of experience there. So, what did they do? They add in a 3-time All-MAC guy from Central Michigan in Troy Brown, and they add in the guy who was the defensive Big 12 defensive newcomer of the year a couple years back at TCU, and it's a question mark, but the talent's there. And then you look at the defensive backs and adding in Aishin Young, who we didn't really see much of him this spring. He was wearing a black jersey for a lot of it. With again, it's probably not working for them to play guys who might be banged up, but he's a guy who was a playmaker at Iowa State, and Ladarius Tennyson from Auburn was a big recruit, and he's a guy who they've really said has looked really good. There's, it's tough to say that you're going to get better, or that when you lose all the sorts of guys that they did, but you look at the talent, and it's is the top level the same as high caliber as it was? I don't know. It's hard to compare guys that they brought into what Sam Williams, for instance, did last year, getting 12.5 sacks, but. You look at the depth and just sort of the number of the bodies, and I think they have to feel pretty good about their overall talent on the defensive side of the ball as well.
Well, you mentioned something in the SEC that's very important, and that's depth. And I mean, I think through the years, recent years and history up there, we've had some really good players. But, once you get past your ones, depth, if you're going to win big in the SEC, you better be deep, brother, at every position.
How about the wide receiver?
No, absolutely. And I think that's where, the coaching staff has really put an emphasis on getting better up front and building depth on the entire roster. And I think the portal has really sort of sped that process up for the better for them.
Well, what about the last thing about the offense before we get totally into defense? What about the wide receiver? How are you going to replace what they had last year up there in catches?
Yeah, it's tough. It was the question last year was who replaced Elijah Moore, and then Ontario Drummond comes in and has a 1,000-yard season and looks pretty good and became a draftable prospect. And Braylon Sanders, he was hurt, but he was productive when he was out there. And those two guys are gone, and so is Ja'Cory Peterson, who I think was their third leading receiver. But the Jonathan Mingo is going to be back. He was banged up this spring. I don't think he played at all in the spring game, and we didn't see him a ton at practice. But I think he's a guy that they are going to need to step into that more prominent role. We've seen flashes from him, and there are times when he looks like an unguardable kind of guy, and then there's just some times where he's dropping passes and it isn't necessarily that consistent guy that you need him to be. So I think he's going to be a guy that is going to be big. The other one for me is Jordan Watkins, the transfer from Louisville. Again, another guy who has been banged up a little bit the last few weeks, but when we saw him in practice, he just looked like someone that the quarterbacks, didn't matter who it was, were just really comfortable with. And in talking to Lane about him, he said he was kind of surprised that his numbers weren't better at Louisville because he looks like a guy who's going to make an impact. And so I think those two guys, is it going to be the exact same production? Who knows? And maybe there's other guys that come in and contribute. But if you were asking me who are going to have to really be the guys, I would say Watkins and Mingo.
Listen, the name slips me, but the big boy from the East Coast that plays baseball can hit the ball about 3 miles.
Tarquan Malone.
He also plays. Thank you, there, Mr. Wood. He also plays on the D line. What's his status? Is he going to finally have to choose between the two? Is he better in one sport than the other? What's the deal with him?
Yeah, I mean, eventually you would probably think he's going to have to make a choice. But when asked about that, Lane basically just sort of said it's his. They kind of try to stay out of that. There were times it's crazy, and I don't even know how one does this, but he doesn't travel for most of the road baseball games just because. That's just kind of the way it goes. And so he would be like at Saturday practices for football getting reps. And it's like, I don't know how a human body does that, like goes from one thing to the other without a whole lot of, time to kind of adjust and get ready. But he's a freak. I mean, he can hit the ball as far as anybody in baseball, but, he was brought in to be a playmaker on the defensive line. And I think there's just so much untapped potential there. Most of these guys do end up having to make a choice eventually. It doesn't sound like they're going to rush him into that right now, but I will say with the talent they've brought in, it's not like he's a shoo-in to get the time that, you would expect from a guy who's a year older. He's going to have to earn it, and that might be a process because he probably is a little bit behind from where the guys who were there for the entire spring were.
Well, listen, Michael, this is Marshall again. I hate to tell you guys, but we have a time schedule, and we're about out of time. I'm going to do we're going to cut loose here in a minute. I want you to stay on the phone and hang with us, so just stand by for a minute. But we're going to need a break to hear from some of our sponsors, and, thanks again for being with us tonight, and maybe you can come back again for another visit. But right now, Dale and I are going to take a break to hear from our sponsors, and we'll be back right after this word.
Phillips Building Supply in Laurel, your hometown building supply store since 1954. We are locally owned and pride ourselves on helping our customers find exactly what they need. From foundations to roofs to doors and windows, Phillips has it. For tools, hardware, lumber, and plywood, visit Phillips Building Supply.
Welcome back, everybody. Dale, that guy Guy talks pretty good for an old boy from California, doesn't he?
Sure does. He's a little bit different, isn't he?
He is a little different, boy. He's on the ball. He's excitable. Listen, my standard question for you following any interview is we go into this final segment. Anything you want to follow up on?
No, I think he did a great job of covering baseball for us and giving us a little, insight into, what was going on. And, he gets to go to practice a lot and see things that the normal person doesn't get to see because, sometimes it's only media are allowed for a short time, to kind of look at it. Nobody else is allowed. So I think I think he did a great job. I think he covered all our bases.
I was going to ask him a question. I know he's only been there. He wasn't there last year, right?
No, he was there during football. He came in like in August or July.
I was going to ask him, and I didn't get to do it, but you can probably answer this question. I know they signed a kid the year before last, I believe it was, the Clowney guy that was first cousin to the Clowney guy. That was so good. Is he still up there?
I hadn't heard that name lately.
I hadn't either. And there was a kid that transferred. They got from Canada. That was like this big defensive player that was just learning the game. Do you remember that guy?
Not right off.
Okay.
Not right off.
Well, boy, that's a fine how you do. You're a lot of help.
I know.
Well, you can only do so
I really
much.
don't keep up with the recruiting in Canada.
Well, he came to Ole Miss. But anyway, I got you. There's a couple of things there. I saw this, and I just want to throw this out. This is an interesting headline to me. It takes a lot to play this football, a lot of money. But I just an article I came across. And here's the headline: Texas high school to build new $35 million football stadium, despite incredibly low enrollment. There's a school out there, Melissa High School, that's got 1,145 students in all 4 grades. Now that's 9, 10, 11, 12. That's about the size of Wayne County High School, isn't it?
They're a couple hundred above us.
Well, they're fixing to build a $35 million football stadium. Man, can you imagine that? Let's see what it says. An hour northeast of Dallas, 42 miles from the center of the city. The population of the town is 18,000, and they're building this unbelievable stadium. I mean, what do you think about that? Is that odd to you? No comment?
Well, now, I assume it's on their tax base of who they got. They're in a county there, that Collin County, that's bumping up there right there in the Frisco, Allen, and McKinney area.
It's a booming area then.
Yeah, it's very booming. It's a lot of high-priced rentals, I don't think there's any rentals out there, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, it's probably a very, very wealthy little town. So, but Texas, they just, they have the tax base. It's just unreal out there.
Must be nice.
Yeah, I mean, really. Of course, when you got as many people as they have out there, you can, they don't have any state income tax.
I didn't realize that.
I mean, they got sales tax,
Yeah.
but no state income tax.
I don't think Florida does.
But they charge you double on your house and your car and everything else, so they make up.
Sneaky rascals.
They make up.
I'm telling you the truth.
Yeah.
Something on my mind coming up this week, and I'm not real up to snuff on this, but I believe we're going to have a draft this week. I believe we're going to have an NFL draft. You know anything about that?
I've been trying to keep up with it. I'm hoping we'll learn more about the draft next week when we have our guest on.
Yeah.
We're going to have a guest from New Orleans, Jonathan Sigler. And Jonathan works for the Saints Wire, which is associated with USA Today. So I think that's a pretty good start. He's going to tell us just about everything that we need to know about the Saints and the Saints draft and if they fill their needs. But in telling you that, I think the Saints got a lot of needs.
Yeah, I'm afraid they do. They better be busy come draft day, ain't they?
Yeah.
Well, listen, the time has come for us to go. We're out of time for tonight's show. We hope that you had lots of fun, but Dale and I have got to run. Before we do, we must say
Goodbye, Dale.
now we are on our way. Follow us on Facebook and at YouTube at the Brouhaha, and stay tuned for the Jack Hankins War Eagle football show right after we get off the air. But for now, take us out of here, Jamie.
You've been listening to the Brouhaha with Dale McKee and Marshall Wood. Heard Tuesday evening, 6 p.m. on WABO. For more of the Brouhaha, follow us during the week on Facebook and WABO.